All right, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started again. Well, we want to thank all the prior presenters. We've received a lot of good information so far, and we're excited to spend just, I guess, a couple hours, according to the agenda, on a topic where we're going to talk about some best practices, the way to advance development in a way that will affect the best results for all stakeholders. And the title that we were assigned was one of a need for speed. So before I introduce our panelists, I thought I'd tell you. So I asked ChatGPT, I said, where is this need for speed title coming from that we've been assigned? Well, I do remember going to a movie in 1984, and it quickly reminded me of that. Yes. Yeah, that day. And I remember Kawasaki, involved in that whole Top Gun Tom Cruise thing. But I'll let you guys decide which of us is Tom Cruise. Maybe it's Chris in the middle. At any rate, I did note, though, that now it's kind of morphed. It's got its own meaning, and its own meaning means love of fast cars, so that still ties in with its original meaning. Thrill-seeking behavior or high-energy lifestyles. So I think if we're all here on a Friday, we're all manifesting a high-energy lifestyle, right? We're here to talk about things like development on a Friday when it's absolutely beautiful outside, so we're high energy. Well, anyway, we'll try to keep the level up. I'm going to introduce our panelists, but before we do that, or actually I'm going to have them introduce themselves. Before we do that, I just wanted to note, so the way we're going to do this is we're going to do it in two parts. We're going to have the first part be about the developer perspective, although we've asked Francis to come join us for both because he provides so much update, or so much insight, I should say, rather, as we try to address these important topics. And then we're going to invite some important policy perspectives as well as historic perspectives to the same topic. And we're going to invite, in the next hour, Representative Ward and then Mr. Jim Kaiserman to come up and be presenters along with us. So first I'll turn it to Chris and then Francis, have them introduce themselves, and then we'll kick it off.
Good afternoon. Glad to be here. Chris Gambroulis. I'm president of Ivory Development. We're the land acquisition development arm for Ivory Homes. I've been with Ivory over 3 decades. And 20 years ago, in 2006, we started a group called the Property Rights Coalition. In 2006, it was the 10 largest residential builders and developers got together to work on legislation at the state level where we could get some traction with legislators where we weren't getting traction with local governments. We passed over 70 bills. They're all consensus bills. They're all consensus items. Nothing goes in a bill that we haven't agreed on with the league and with UAC. And the sad part of that statistic is that instead of passing 7 bills and just moving on, we have to keep going back every year, playing whack-a-mole on policy issues. So, and I don't think 2027 will be much different.
My name is Francis Lilly. I am the assistant city manager and planning director for Mill Creek City, which is
My hometown.
your hometown. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
And it's actually the hometown to many land use attorneys, which makes my job kind of fun. But I'm also the legislative policy chair for the Utah chapter of the American Planning Association. And we this year have been working on a committee. Fred is one of our committee members, and I also work with Wilf. And I've been a land use planner for a long time. All in the Wasatch Front area. In fact, all along 33rd South. I started at West Valley City, then went to South Salt Lake, and now am in Mill Creek. My next job will probably be with the Forest Service, but I hear they're not hiring.
We're not paying.
They're certainly not paying. But I've a lot of my work has been in infill and housing development, and I've been pretty fortunate to work with a bunch of cities that are generally pro-housing, right? We see the lack of housing or the lack of available housing as a problem, and that puts me in a kind of an interesting position as a planner. I've also had the privilege of working with these two gentlemen, both on the same side of the table and on opposite sides of the table. And so Utah's a small state, but these are really good guys, and I'm happy to be here today.
Well, thanks, Francis, for joining, and we're lucky to have you here on the panel as well. So Chris was being a little bit modest in his introduction. He says he's been at this for a while. I mean, I always think of him as the one who is kind of the point that around which all these policy discussions revolve, particularly from the property owner and developer's perspective. He's done a very good job of getting the whole group together to talk about things. When I say the whole group, I'm talking even commercial developers who sometimes bug you. You'll involve them and the home builders and everyone else to make sure that we get all of the policies on the table so we can have a good, effective discussion. And today we want to talk a little bit about 2026, which we just concluded. And then we're going to talk about how we can better implement some of the tools that were passed in the prior maybe 5 or 6 sessions, because we think there's some real opportunities to realize some real benefits for all of us involved, including our communities, if we can, come around and center on how we can better implement some of these policies. So I'm going to show this little image right here. This came from the newsletter that Chris's group put out after the session. This shows a lot of representatives of the League of Cities and Towns, a lot of developers, and a lot of other stakeholders all together, recognizing the work that they've done together over the last 20 years. And Chris, with that, I think maybe you can talk a little bit about, if you would, some of the notable things that you were able to achieve as a group, as a collective group in 2027, and maybe some of the changes you've been noticing as of late. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think, thank you. That was a really cool day, actually, at the Capitol, in both the Senate and the House. The picture in the middle is with the Senate president, and in that picture is Sean Guzman and Lynn Pace, and Wade was there, and they read a citation in both the Senate floor and the House floor, recognizing the Utah Land Use Task Force and the Property Rights Coalition for 20 years of working together collaboratively to advance policies and ideas to make land use in Utah fairer, more predictable, and more efficient. And we're all benefited from that. Truthfully, there is no benefit to a city or a county being less efficient and returning applications multiple times. This year, as Wilf, if you were here this morning and you saw Wilf's speed dating slides, there were a lot of things in House Bill 268 and other notable things. There were some that were, I think really impactful. The planning commissioner training, I think, is a really important thing.
Well, and let me just stop you there, because I think one of the things that I think might be helpful for this group is to understand that behind what gets adopted is always a story, and we can redact the names to protect the guilty. But I think it may be helpful to share with this group some of the stories that motivated some of the changes we're dealing with, and about how we can work together to avoid, becoming a story that results in a bill being passed.
And whether it's at the local level or at the state level, we legislate by anecdote.
Right.
You do at cities. We know you do. That happens at the state. There's always a story. Wolf talked about the hotel and 45 feet or 4 stories, and which is it? And the planning commissioner ethics training came from an experience that we had where there were a couple of planning commissioners on an active application that were hosting meetings in their living rooms of neighbors to gin up opposition to our pending application that they were then going to vote on later. And
make it worse, I think they also would go and open the county building to hold unnoticed meetings.
They would go to the rec center. It was interesting. So don't do that. Or don't get off the planning commission. I mean, these are positions of trust, and you're expected to act professionally, and we know it's hard. We know it's We know it's hard to have people come in and yell at you. Sometimes if they're not happy, um, that it's never not been an issue. In the 32 years I've been doing this for Ivory, and we've done in my time, I mean, I can't even tell you how many planning commission, city council meetings I've done in that period of time, and 650 subdivisions, 23,000 lots. And we get told there's a lot of bad things, and planning commissioners ought to hold, and Carson used the term, it's an impermissible bias, or the um, appearance of an impermissible bias. And so, come and do that. The last couple of years, we've done quite a bit. I think that over the last 2 to 3 years, there have been a lot of things around deadlines, shot clocks. We have still a lot of municipalities and counties that are ignoring those. And it means more legislation. If you want to put us out of business, just do your thing and let us do our thing.
We're going to get into those in just a moment, but what I thought I would ask is Francis, if he could share his perspective, because a big notable change, as you heard from Wilf's presentation, is that in Senate Bill 284, now cities are going to be required for lots, well, cities over 5,000 residents are going to be required to accommodate ADUs. This is not an idea that originated with the home builders. This is not an idea that originated with the Property Rights Coalition in itself, although we've been supporters. But this has been something that Representative Ward, who will be up here talking to us in a moment, has been helping. But I want to give the cities credit too, because the cities quickly adopted and signed on to this, and that's how we got to consensus. So maybe, Francis, maybe you can share with us how cities have been addressing this issue of the need for more housing and how ADUs fit into that whole puzzle.
Sure. So the ADU issue, as Wade mentioned, was really one of the first big legislative mandates, if you will. But and we quickly recognized when we did some community engagement on this that the community sentiment on ADUs was far more nuanced than we thought. And that's because in Mill Creek's situation, I think was interesting in that, this may be something that you all recognize. We have a population that's aging. They're having some difficulty selling their homes, right? Because they're just worth too damn much money. They're in a situation where they need to move, they need to do something. And so what that meant was that there was a kind of a homegrown demand for an option that did one of two things, right? It would allow someone to age in place on their property, right, and begin the transition of their property to their kids, or two, it creates affordability on both ends. This is why I love the ADU concept. It creates affordability for the potential buyer because now they've got a source of income that they can rely upon to pay their mortgage for this really expensive house that they have. But it also creates affordability theoretically for the tenant because these units or these dwellings tend to be a little bit smaller, and on a square footage basis they'd be cheaper than a townhouse or an equivalent apartment. So I've always been a big advocate of the ADU concept. Mill Creek, although we didn't need to, adopted a detached ADU component. We also adopted a process where someone could convert an existing accessory structure subject to fire code and building code modifications into an ADU, provided they find an equivalent amount of off-street parking. Because it just made sense to us. Interestingly enough, though, the city does have an owner occupancy requirement on that ADU because that was one thing that the community didn't like, was this idea that some investor could come in and buy a whole bunch of units and rent them out two at a time. That slowed the uptake of ADUs in our community. We haven't had as many takers for ADUs, more for the internal than for the external, than I thought we would. We're only into about maybe 150 at this point, which is not a lot. One reason for that is it's really expensive to build an ADU.
Yeah, for
Right.
sure.
You know,
Yeah, it definitely is. So thank you for that perspective. That was good. A couple other things, and then we wanted to start talking about what are some other items that we can collectively work on to make sure that we're uh, delivering product more quickly. One of the things I did want to note is that a benefit of this new requirement that we take city councils and county commissions out of the appeal authority role is that that was actually an idea that came, if you'll believe it, from city attorneys who will sometimes call on a no names basis and give us an idea. And then we take it forward. But what we found from at least the property owner's perspective, because that's my perspective, I always represent property owners and developers, is that sometimes you would have situations where, because there was a potential where a commission or a council might in the future be in a territory, you might you might run into the place. Oh, okay. Okay. You might run into the place where all of a sudden you're not able to go and do your First Amendment right to lobby your elected officials. And so you would have situations where you had something complicated where you needed to get understanding. In fact, as many of you know, probably most of you know, it's really difficult under the light of a public meeting with a whole room full of people for everyone to understand every intricate detail. People don't always have 5 hours to take that in. And so a lot of times what's a best practice is to go and have one-on-ones or two-on-two meetings with elected officials. And it's a protected right in the Constitution, First Amendment, that you're allowed to go and petition your elected officials. And the fact that they might later be an appeal authority was being used by some people to prevent us from talking to those people. So an aim of this bill and of that provision is to promote better engagement between those who are pursuing a development application and those who have to decide, a rezone request or these topics. So that's another, if you will, story or motivation behind a change that was incepted in terms of an idea from some well-meaning and willing to share city attorneys who then passed along to us, and we were able to help together bring that forward. I wanted to just go down a list, if we could, right now, of some of the things that have been done in the last few years, and have Chris provide for us some input on how we as a group can come together to make sure that the tools that have been produced to date can be best and most effectively used. And so the first one I wanted to talk about was the plat process improvements. Okay.
Yeah, this was a really big one, and Chase with DAIs here and Rob from DR Horton were both very, very involved in these conversations and even drafting the language. But the idea in that plat approval process was, several fold. One was to eliminate the spin cycle of forever red lines. And incomplete red lines um, as they come back. So that's why we have 4 chances, shot clocks, how many days you get to do it. You only get to do it once during preliminary or final, because there are municipalities that take full final engineering at preliminary. And then there are some that don't look at any engineering at preliminary and do it all at final. But you can't do it both. The other thing that really was important in this, and we agreed with this, is that as applicants, we have an obligation to submit complete applications, not incomplete applications. And that was a complaint and a criticism that we heard, was that there are applicants who will come in and submit, half a set of engineering for whatever reason. I was calling the engineer and beating them up because they were taking too long, or they took on too much work or whatever. And we thought that was a fair criticism. And so now we have complete applications, what needs to be in it. You've got to pay your fees up front, so that the applicants, the property owners, are doing all of their job. And then the expectation is that also is being done by the reviewers. The other thing, and along the same lines of taking the city councils out of appeals, was taking them out of final plat approvals. And now the city council's work is done at zoning, and then everything after that's administrative anyway. Why are you going to a legislative body to hear people come in? So the land is rezoned. You've got approvals. You're going through preliminary. People come and complain. And then you go to the city council, and then the problem is that the people were having an expectation that the council could deny the final plat approval, and they couldn't. So why would you put them in that position to begin with? Why are you making them vote on something that they have no discretion? All you're doing is making people mad in the surrounding neighborhood. So so that was about efficiency, and it was also really about, and these are things that city attorneys agree with us on. They're like, yeah, well, I hate that my council votes on that. We had a lot of pushback on that from city councils and mayors with 25 feet